So you can see stages 1 and 2 are already there. This is what you will receive, sort of, you know, with this column on the right-hand side actually filled out. Morning, grab a sheet before you sit down. And so you'll get your original mark there and your prototyping mark. And then you'll have added on the implementation stage and what marks you get rewarded for that, okay? So first let's have a look at the final product. Now, just to reiterate what I said last week, the final product is due on Thursday, right? It's due this term, as opposed to the project report, which is due later. Now, before I talk about any of the actual elements, please note that the implementation stage as a whole is 65 marks, right? 33 of those marks are in the product. 32 are in the report, okay? Now, that division is very intentional. I hope you get that I'm trying to demonstrate something here. It's kind of like in maths, you know how they say your working is really important? It's sort of something we have to beat out of you from primary school, that, you know, primary school maths is kind of just get the answer. And that's the important thing. Are you right or are you wrong, okay? But in maths in high school, we're about, can you demonstrate that you understand how you got there? How the process is really important. And that's why the project report is worth so much, okay? So let's start to talk about some of the elements under the final product. Demonstrates original and creative use of appropriate software. Okay, what does that mean? I try to put original and creative, they're kind of synonyms, but people get different connotations with them. What am I trying to avoid? In any kind of software that you use, if you use it in a basic sort of way, you can get something that's sort of workable out of it. So, example, in PowerPoint, or in Google Docs, that kind of thing, or in Sites for that matter, there's a whole bunch of preset templates that you can use, which will, you know, produce something that's kind of workable and looks semi-attractive, and will give you sort of a professional look in some ways because they were designed by professionals, right? But that doesn't really demonstrate creative use of the software. It's not your creativity, it's someone else's, right? And you're just kind of using their template. So as an example, what I'm looking for is if you created a website, which is most of you, but not all of you, I'm looking for you to go past what was just the standard forms that were given to you. Have you adapted them a little bit? Have you mucked around them to see how it could fit for your purposes rather than just taken what was stock standard and run with that, okay? In the same way, I'm looking for you to explore all the different kinds of options and all the different things that you can tweak and adjust in if you're looking at, you know, video editing software, right? There will be basic effects, really standard ones which are easy to apply, but there will be ones which take more effort and which are trickier to use, which will be really helpful for your project. So have you pursued those kinds of settings and features in the software that you're using? That's what original or creative use means. Okay, are you pushing the software to its limits, or are you just using sort of the basic functions, something which anyone could walk off the street and do? Okay. Second dot point. The system employs all media types substantially. Okay, hopefully that doesn't need as much explanation as any of the others. All I'm looking for is, okay, are all of the multimedia types that we've studied in the course, are they represented in your system? And importantly, are they represented substantially? Okay, so the classic example where people fall down on this, actually there's two, text and audio. Text and audio, okay? Text, you might think, oh, there's always going to be text in there, right? But sometimes people use text in a way which is kind of like, I've just dumped all this text here and I haven't thought about whether it's actually going to be useful to the project or not, or appropriate, right? The same thing happens to audio, but in the reverse. People kind of panic and they're like, man, audio production is really hard. I don't know how to make it fit with my project. And so it's sort of there as a, in a token way, but not substantially. Okay, so I've marked many major projects in the past where the sole containment of audio in the whole project is just some background music on the website. Okay, now there's nothing wrong with background music for the website. Okay, but is it just like a 30-second looping audio clip, which actually doesn't add very much to your project? If I removed it, would your project suffer? Particularly, would people sense something different about the system? Would it have an effect on how they read the story and that kind of thing? Well, maybe not, okay? So you really need to think carefully about, you guys actually have it way better than the first people who I gave this project to. You guys all have audio software and hardware in your pockets, on your phones, and in your laptops, and you have a lot of access to sort of play around with that and not just put on like an audio track with very, very little actual adjustment. So when it says substantial, that means, have you actually given some thought to how you're going to put this in, and is it there in a real way? If I took it away, would you lose something out of the project? Okay. All right, thirdly, showcases unique strengths of each media type. Okay, this is related to the previous one, right? But are you using text where text should be used? Are you using video where it should be used? Or are you just kind of using video because I wanted to lump everything together? And the main example I just showed you at the beginning was a video, okay? That's not necessarily going to be a helpful use of the media type. And this is 6 marks, right? So what I'm looking for you to do is, okay, numbers appear here for a reason. One of the reasons why I gave you a mystery as the kind of system that you were going to create is because it actually opens up all kinds of different ways to use media types in unusual ways. And one of the examples was in Internet Story, right? He uses a numerical data type as a code, right? Which is actually, it totally fits with the genre that you're using, right? It's not like I put numbers here because the marking rubric said I had to put numbers, okay? It actually fits with the project, okay? Showcases unique strengths. So think carefully as well about, for instance, some of you have put captions onto your videos, or you've said you want to put captions on your videos. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with captions, but are you putting captions in because your audio is not good? Not because the captions are actually, this is the best way to convey your information, okay? Are you putting in captions because the video is not clear? Maybe you should make the video clearer rather than using a media type for which it's not really suited, okay? Sometimes you put captions into a movie because it conveys something really important, okay? For instance, I mean, I know it's a trivial example, but if you've got characters in a scene and they're speaking another language, and you don't want other characters to know, but you want the audience to know, that's an appropriate use of subtitles, right? But just putting subtitles in because your actor or you is just talking too fast, right? That's not a good use of the media type. That's actually it's sort of like a crutch. Like I admitted I didn't do a very good job, so I sort of used multimedia, one of the types, to cover that weakness, okay? That's not playing to the strengths of the media type. Okay? All right, before I go on, are there any questions about those first 3 dot points? Right, number 4. Suitable balance between breadth of content and level of detail. In other words, the scope of the final product represents an appropriate achievement given the development limitations. Okay, so I hope you can see there's a contrast there between breadth and depth, right? So for instance, if you made like a 30-second film and that was the whole thing, right? But it was a really good 30 seconds, okay? That would still be kind of probably not an appropriate achievement given the limitations that you were given. Namely, you were given weeks and weeks and weeks to produce a project, and 30 seconds, even though it may have put a lot of time into those 30 seconds, it's not going to be a substantial product at the other end. In the same way, if you have like a really long, like a 25-minute thing, but it's pretty rubbish, and the camera angles are terrible, and you've seen some scenes that aren't very good, but you haven't reshot them to sort of improve the quality of it, then again, that's not a balance between breadth and depth, right? So I'm essentially looking to see, have you used your time effectively, okay? Being that the parameters of the project were, you could do anything you liked, have you chosen something that fits what you were required to, what time you actually had to work with the project, okay? Content effectively conveys a story with mystery elements. Okay, now I had to put this in. It's only 1 element out of 6 for the final product, okay? But I am looking for you to tell a story well, right? For it to be actually a compelling mystery. Now, if the mystery sucks, you won't get full marks for that. But it's not. Can you see? It's not going to compromise your entire project. It's only 5 marks out of 33 for the final product. And most of you, from what I've seen in the prototypes, you actually have quite interesting stories and slightly creepy stories. For some of you, very creepy stories. But I'm looking for you to actually, okay, I've used music because here it's really effective at producing a mood in the system user. Or I've put thought into this story, and when you've finished it at the end, you're like, oh, I want to go back and do this again because it's quite compelling and quite interesting, right? And does it effectively convey that, right? So if you use techniques like voiceovers, like camera angles, all that kind of thing, when people watch it, are they going to feel like, yes, this is a mystery? And lastly, for the final product, it exhibits multiple levels of refinement that reflect the spiral development approach. Okay, so we've been studying this to death, right? But the whole point of the spiral development approach is that the quality of the whole product improves incrementally as time passes, right? That you don't have, okay, when I was 50% through the way of the project, I had the first 5 minutes of my 10-minute film filmed, and I hadn't touched the last 5 minutes. The idea is I have all 10 minutes. They're not very good, but once I put them all together, I can see how they fit, and I can show it to people and ask for some feedback. As opposed to, if I just had the first 5 minutes, people will watch it and they'll be like, well, my feedback is it's not finished, right? So I'm going to be looking for things like, okay, is the audio of a decent quality? Are the links all pointing to the right places? Are there spelling errors? You know, I mean, apart from intentional ones, because you know it's a mystery, and maybe that's part of your clues for your project. Okay, I'm going to be looking for things like that. Images, are they well chosen? Are they arranged in a helpful way? Are they just the first ones? If I search for, you know, for instance, if part of your project has to do with puzzles, right? Like Leo's is, the titles of his is Jigsaw, right? And suppose he has pictures of puzzles. When I go on Google image search and I put in puzzle, is it just going to be the first 10 pictures on the page, okay? That's not multiple levels of refinement. You have enough time, you can go take your own pictures, right? You could go back and reshoot scenes because the first time you did them, the lighting was quite poor or the audio wasn't very good. All those kinds of things, right? That's what having a project of this length and forcing you to do a prototype early on and then getting a final product out of you, that's the point behind it, okay? So I'm looking for it to be refined, for it to be, yeah, I saw this and I've improved upon it, as opposed to, you know, what usually happens when you submit something, like a project, and then you get it back, you're like, wow, I can't believe I made these basic errors, because that's what happens when you're down to the wire, and you've finished the last scene, you know, at 8:45 in the morning before you had to hand it in, okay? So we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to make sure every element of the project is refined, okay?